Hi guys, we're just gonna wrap up chapter 4 and talk about, I gave a lecture and forgot to record it. So now I'm hopefully recording this. So we're gonna wrap up chapter 4, like I said, and do a little bit of nervous, a little bit of muscular, talk about repair and aging, and that's it for chapter 4. So let's start with muscle tissue. We have a whole chapter dedicated to muscle tissue later in the semester. So we're really just skimming the surface of muscle tissue. That's just this little taste of what it is. Obviously, it's specialized for contraction and movement. There's 3 types: skeletal, cardiac, and smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is found in hollow organs like the stomach and intestines and blood vessels. Skeletal muscle is what you're thinking of when you think of muscle. This is like our muscles. So they're classified in a few ways. They could be striated or non-striated. The striations are just referring to the fact that they look like they're striped when you look at them under a microscope, and that has to do with their microscopic organization. We'll talk about that later in the semester. They could have a single nucleus or they could be multinucleate. They could be controlled voluntarily, where you consciously say, okay, I want to pick my nose right now, or involuntarily, which would be like your intestines turning away. So skeletal muscles are very long, thin. They are usually called muscle fibers. That's a term you'll get used to calling them later. They do not undergo division. They're produced by stem cells called myosatellite cells. And here you can see that they're striped or striated. They have several nuclei. They're long, straight, cylindrical, and again, main function is for movement. There's cardiac muscle cells, or cardiocytes. These are branched. They're not long and cylindrical. They're actually branched, and they connect together through a structure called an intercalated disc. They're involuntary and striated, and they have very limited repair capabilities, which you know if you know anyone that's had a heart attack. So they are branched, much different than the skeletal muscle. Those intercalated discs help to coordinate their contractions. And again, we'll talk about that later when we get into the heart, which is next semester. Then we get to smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is long, tapered, looks very different than the other types of muscles. They can divide and regenerate. They're non-striated and involuntary, which means you don't coordinate those contractions or movements. And here you see what they look like, just long, cylindrical, one little nuclei. Easy peasy. Let's talk about nervous tissue or neural tissue. The majority of it is found in the brain, specialized for conducting nerve impulses or electrical impulses. It's basically sending and receiving signals. So it's taking sensory input and then responding to it. And the majority of it is in the central nervous system, which is the brain and spinal cord. Well, we have a whole chapter dedicated to this. So this is another one. We're just skimming the surface of nervous tissue. There's 2 kinds of neural cells. You have the neurons, or the nerve cells. That's what you're thinking of when you think of, nervous tissue. And then neuroglial cells, which are, or sometimes they're called glial cells, which is a G. These are the supportive cells, and they're there to support, repair, nourish, protect all of the neurons. So they have a couple parts to the neurons: the cell body, which is where the nucleus is, the dendrites, which are the little connections coming off of the cell body, and then a long fiber called an axon, which is where the electrical signal is conducted. Here you see what I mean, connections coming in from other neurons to the dendrites here, to the cell body, and then the axon, which then connects, or it branches off and forms connections with other neurons, and that forms a whole neural network, all of which we'll talk about later in the semester. So let's talk about tissue and repair. There's really 2 processes involved in tissue repair. There's inflammation and then regeneration. Inflammation is the initiation of the repair process. Regeneration is the actual repair. So in inflammation, this is where your body's basically sending up the flare, saying, we've been damaged, we've been injured, we need more blood here, we need some immune system cells to the area, we got to fix this stat. So this is swelling, the redness, the pain. You would remember this from anything from getting a paper cut to having a full-on systemic reaction, like when you have a fever. All of that is the inflammatory response. So it's usually triggered by physical trauma or by some type of infection or pathogen. So in this process, whatever's been damaged is going to send out signals. These signals can be in the form of proteins, potassium ions, or something called a prostaglandin. A prostaglandin is basically a little cell messenger that is received by the surrounding cells, and it's kind of like a little game of telephone where it's like, I've been injured, I've been injured, I've been injured, and then so on down the chain, eventually it gets to a cell that can respond. So as that cell starts to break down from the injury, basically the lysosomes inside that cell are going to release the enzymes that are going to digest all of the parts, help destroy the injured cell, clean out the debris from the area, and hopefully move it forward. This whole process is called necrosis. It's the process of tissue death or tissue destruction. So the process of inflammation is there to push out that dead and dying tissue, bring in new healthy cells, increase the oxygen to the area so that those cells can metabolize, regrow, and repair themselves. So all that necrotic tissue hopefully is swept out. If it's not, then an abscess can form, and that can be pretty nasty to deal with. Generally, the injury should stimulate mast cells. These mast cells are producing histamine and heparin. Histamine and heparin are going to increase blood flow to the area through vasodilation, and the heparin is going to reduce the blood clotting, so it's allowing that blood to flow freely through that area to sweep out the dead debris. So through inflammation, again, we have dilation of the blood vessels, the plasma's coming into the area, causing that swelling, increasing the pain level, and then all the little phagocytes, Pac-Man, are coming through, gobbling up all of the debris, all of the waste, and any bacteria that are there. So here's a nice visual for you. You have your injury, so all of your injured cells are going to start releasing some type of signal in the form of a prostaglandin or chemical, stimulating the mast cells. Mast cells produce histamine, heparin, which are going to increase blood flow, increase vessel permeability, meaning more oxygen can come in, more carbon dioxide can leave. It's also going to cause some pain. You're going to have an increased local temperature, increased oxygen to the area because of the increased metabolic demand, increased number of phagocytes there gobbling things up like little Pac-Men, removal of all of the waste because the blood is flowing quickly through that area, trying to sweep everything out, and then this process of regeneration where that diseased tissue is becoming repaired and normal tissue is being restored. So once that injury and infection is cleaned up, that's when the healing and regeneration can occur. And in that process of regeneration, the fibrocytes come into the area. Fibrocytes are basically, I don't know, I think of them as like Spider-Man, you know how he says like, go web, and the little web shoots out of his arm, right? That's kind of like what fibrocytes are. They're there, and when they say go web, it's collagen that comes out of their arm. They're basically shooting collagen out all over the place to try to repair that area. And whether the area is on the inside of the body or the outside of the body, like our skin, it's collagen that forms our scar tissue. It's collagen that's forming those connections and repairing the tissue. So as that collagen is being laid down, new mesenchymal cells can kind of deposit themselves amongst the collagen, and the mesenchymal cells can start to differentiate into other cells, like fibrocytes or you know, any of the other types of cells that are needed in that specific area, liver cells or, you know, whatever. Not all tissues can regenerate themselves though. Like nerve cells cannot regenerate. So typically if a nerve cell was damaged, that area will no longer have sensation or respond to neural control. It may eventually over time as more neuronal circuits form in that area, but the damaged neuron will not be able to repair itself. Let's talk about aging briefly. As we move through all these chapters, you will find that when we get to the end, we'll usually talk a little bit about aging and pathologies, dealing with whatever system we were talking about. It's kind of doom and gloom. It's kind of sad because most of it happens when you're right about 30 and older, which most of us are around that age. So it's a little bit depressing, but it's also interesting to learn what's going on with our bodies. So kind of take it as a learning experience. Okay, so it's kind of how I try to look at the bright side. So as we get older, everything slows down, as most of us have figured out at this point. The speed and efficiency that our tissue can repair itself, slowing way down. Hormones slow way down. The tissue is not going to respond as easily to the hormones, so it's not going to repair as easily either. Reduced physical activity is going to play a role also, because the less you exercise, the less your blood flows, the less oxygen you have, the less metabolism, and it's kind of a never-ending spiral there. So make sure you keep exercising as you get older. overall effects of aging. So the chemical and structural tissue is going to change. You're going to have thinning epithelial. Your connective tissue is going to continue to thin. All of those collagen elastic fibers are going to begin to stretch out, lose their elasticity. You get the sagging, or you get the wrinkles. All that stuff is all because the connective tissue fibers not responding like they used to, because they're not being repaired like they used to, because everything's slowing down. So joint pain, broken bones can result more when you're older, again, because the repair process isn't there. The collagen that makes up your bones just isn't being repaired as quickly. Cardiovascular disease, mental deterioration, all resulting from aging. Cancer is also going to increase. 1 in 4 United States citizens will develop cancer, which is unfortunate. It's actually the number 2 cause of death, though. What's the number 1 cause of death? Heart disease. Heart disease is the number 1 cause of death, which is mostly preventable, which is kind of a crazy thing. Cancer can be preventable too. There's like environmental factors, as well as like behaviors like smoking cigarettes, that can contribute to cancer. But cancer has a huge genetic component as well. So I think, yep, that's it. So we just wrapped up chapter 4. I hope this helped you. If I talk too fast, go back, re-listen, or just let me know what questions you have. Have a good one.